then all the different disciplines combined, sport climbing, which is my discipline, bouldering, of which I've done just a little bit, trad, I haven't done a whole lot, but I really love it, and then dry tooling I'd never done before, so that sounded exciting.
Hi, I'm Neil Gresham, a rock and ice climber from the UK. I'm actually based in Kendal, right in the heart of the festival, and I'm very lucky to be joined by my friend and climbing partner Anak Verhoeven, who is from Belgium and one of the world's top leading sport climbers, just fresh from climbing a 9B sport route in Spain. Maybe Anak, I don't know, do you want to start off by saying a little bit about that route and how that went?
Well, it's my hardest sport climb to date, so I'm really glad that I was able to send it within one climbing trip. I had not expected that. I had expected to just try the moves and then go back home and train for it specifically and then go back to try and send, but it all worked out, and yeah, I'm just so happy to have climbed that amazing line. It's 45 meters long and just very endurance-y on tiny, tiny holes.
And you actually did it twice. You did it a second time just for fun, didn't you?
I did, for fun. Yes, you could say for fun, because I had sent it the normal way with knee pads, as most people do. And then somehow I had this funny idea to try and send it without knee pads, just as a personal challenge. Yes, the old school way.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And that worked out as well. It was just an amazing experience, and I was way more relaxed too that second time I sent it, and that made the whole experience more enjoyable.
Pressure was off. It was just,
that's it.
Yeah, just
it was
time for pure climbing fun.
The perfect recipe for me to perform, because I was still very focused. I knew all the moves and all the beta by heart, but the pressure was off, as you said.
For sure. And that was when this story about, well, the film that we've showed here at Kendal Mountain Festival started, because meantime, while you were working on that 9B, I was back here in the UK trying to map out a challenge, like a link-up round. I got very inspired by Dave MacLeod, who did this climbing challenge in Scotland where he did a boulder problem, then a traditional route and a sport climb and a winter climb, and then he walked around all these Munros in 24 hours. And I thought, what a brilliant thing to do. I've always enjoyed doing different climbing disciplines, and I thought the idea of like making up your own challenge was fantastic. And I actually found out someone had done something quite similar to that in the Lake District, a guy called Dan Turner, and I thought, I want to do something like that myself. And I started mapping out my challenge, and then I thought, wouldn't it be really good to get a climbing partner with me on that trip, on this challenge, so I could actually not just have a belayer, but someone who would actually do the climbs with me. And that was when I had the idea, of course, to invite you, Anak. And I mean, how did you feel when I first invited you on the challenge? What was your reaction? I mean, I think it involved a few things that you hadn't even heard of before, like going around Wainwrights, for example.
Wainwrights? What was that?
What's a Wainwright?
No idea.
Yeah.
You're right. Well, I was still in Spain the moment you called me, and I had just sent that 9B. So, wow, it was something completely different from what I had just done. You thought it would be a good idea just to change scenes and go to a totally different place and have a different kind of challenge. So what did I think? I needed a little time to think about it and figure out if it was something that I wanted to do, but it didn't take a lot of time, did it?
Yeah, exactly.
I quickly knew that I really wanted to, especially like the idea of, well, doing it with you, which is very different from what I usually do. Being a climber, most of the time you're just alone, and then all the different disciplines combined, sport climbing, which is my discipline, bouldering, of which I've done just a little bit, trad, I haven't done a whole lot, but I really love it, and then dry tooling I'd never done before, so that sounded exciting.
That was the wild card, wasn't
Yes.
it? But I think the thing we both know after years of hard climbing is that after doing a super hard project or winning a World Cup, for example, you're in a little bit of there's a little bit of a hangover, a bit of a shadow. It's like you've been on this big high. Well, what am I going to do next? I mean, the first thing, of course, you have to do is have a bit of a rest, because by definition, you've just pushed it to the absolute limit. So you've got to do something that's maybe a bit easier, but also something that just feels different as well. So you're not comparing it. And I think that's where, I dare say, that's where this challenge really fitted in for you. And plus, as you say, a chance to see a different part of the, I mean, you hadn't climbed in the UK before, you hadn't been to the Lake District before, you came and met my family for the first time. So there were all these new things, and I guess it probably worked for you in that respect.
Yeah. And the amazing thing was that it was still challenging.
Yeah,
even though,
yeah, it was still hard.
Yeah, the whole thing, the whole combination of the disciplines made it hard, even physically. Because you say, well, it wasn't as hard as what you had just done in Spain. No, but it wasn't easy either.
No, it wasn't. And I guess this is the thing about link-up rounds or anything, you know, like doing it, people who do triathlons or anything. It's the sum of the parts, isn't it? And it's putting it all together. And I mean, we even had to plan, I mean, by my standards, we planned the equipment very meticulously. We had our bouldering gear, and then we had our trad climbing gear. Then we were going to leave that behind, pick up the sport climbing gear. Then we had the bag with the dry tooling stuff, and it was like which clothing we needed for which and the footwear. Because, I mean, there was no time for anything to go wrong. I mean, we couldn't afford to get to the bottom of the dry tooling route and realise that we didn't have our ice axes. So we actually had to be quite organised, but in a very different way. And I think this is the other thing with so many elite athletes are just repeating the same set piece over and over and over again. It's what they know, it's what they can do. But we just really liked the idea of just coming up with something that was going to cause us to rethink things and do things in a different way, didn't we?
And then we keep talking about the hiking part.
Well.
I'm not a great hiker, so that was the biggest doubt I had before saying yes. I was like, whew, what's that going to be like? I had no idea what the Wainwrights were and how hard it would be, especially after the 4 climbing disciplines.
And I was trying to say they're not like kind of alpine peaks, but at the same time, you know, it's still, it's funny. I think I joked during the challenge that for someone who runs ultra marathons, going around 8 Wainwrights is literally nothing. But then going around 8 Wainwrights after you've just done a reasonably hard boulder problem, sport climb, trad climb, dry tool, it's putting it all together. And the other thing, of course, is putting it all together with a very narrow weather window, the likes of which the UK is notorious for. And of course, you arrived in the UK, you barely even had time to put your bag down, and I was like, quick, we need to go out now and prep these climbs, because in 3 days' time, there's like 2 weeks of rain coming in, you know, and we prepped the climbs over 2 days, and then when we went out on challenge day, we knew that the next day, that was it. There was no more chance. And for me, that was a lot of pressure, because I'm not used to performing like on the day. But for you as a competition climber, that's actually quite normal, isn't it? You're used to just delivering the goods when it counts.
Yes, but then the fatigue was the hardest part for me, because, as you said, we prepared it. Those days were exhausting. Then we had only one rest day, which wasn't restful at all, because we were just running around the house preparing all the gear. And then we went for it, and we had only that day, and then it started raining.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, I think the most worrying moment was when we got to the bottom of the trad climb. And let's remember here, this is like your 4th ever trad climb. By trad climbing, we mean climbing with natural protection, like placing your own protection as you climb. And of course, there's a slightly more risk with that style of climbing. You know, you have to place the protection in the cracks securely, because if it rips out, you could take quite a bad fall. So Anak has done, you know, less of that. Like, well, you can count your climbs on one hand, and we get to this route, and of course it's the bottom half of it is running with water. And on any other day, I think you just wouldn't have attempted this route. You'd have just deemed it as not safe. But it was challenge day, and we knew the weather was only going to get worse, and we decided to go for it anyway, didn't we? But you know, I think the really important thing is always making safe judgment calls. As much as we wanted to do that challenge, we also had to make sure that what we were doing was safe. And when we discussed it at the bottom of the route, we were like, okay, yeah, it's wet, but as long as we put the protection in all the right places, as we've planned, it's still actually a safe thing to do.
Yes, it was sketchier, but we weren't being stupid.
We weren't being reckless. Yeah,
Reckless,
it made it
no.
harder, because you know some of the best holds were too wet to use, and you had to use smaller holds, and you had to like dry your feet out on your trousers as you were climbing. And yeah, it just made it a tougher experience. But I dare say, like a fantastic introduction to the sort of British style of climbing to a visiting Belgian.
Apparently, I've had the full British experience, right?
It was a character building experience. I mean, you experienced midges. Yeah, you experienced bog.
Yes.
Things that I dare say you hadn't encountered before.
Black slimy rock.
Black slimy rock,
Moss.
vegetated rock. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
all of it.
Yeah, and then lots of cairns on top of hilltops in the dark in the
And
mist.
sheep.
And sheep. Question is, would you come back and do it again? Well, not the same challenge, but something similar.
I think so, yes. Yeah, especially with a good climbing partner, because that was great. We had just such good teamwork, and it was motivating to do it together. At the same time, it did add some pressure, especially I remember it was during the trad climbing stage that it suddenly hit me. Like, if I fail now, then I'm letting Neil down.
Because there just wasn't time for us to have another go. It was like one go and that was it. So that was pressure, but it was definitely teamwork too, as you say. I mean, but just for me, reflecting on that challenge, what I loved the most about it was that, I mean, I'm obviously a British climber. I've been climbing for 40 years. I know the Lake District pretty well. But yeah, I had this totally new experience in my own back garden just by rewriting the rule book, like thinking about things in a different way, rather than just doing one super hard climb, doing lots of different climbs. And it kind of occurred to me that anyone can do this. It doesn't have to be great. I mean, our climbs were all in the 8th grade, but they could be in the 5th grade. You could do V5 and, E5, do what you want. Or, you could do a hiking-based challenge, or literally, I do think that we often default to these kind of set pieces and doing the same things, and that was the thing that was for me was so joyful about it. Was just doing something that, like, making up our own rules, not worrying about what anyone else thought about it, and just going out and having some fun.
Right, the options are endless, really.
Yeah, for sure.
But then we only had 15 minutes to spare because the goal was to do it all within 24 hours.
Yeah. And, and because we'd made our own rules, like if we hadn't made it to that last cairn within 24 hours, we would have both known that we'd failed on it.
Right, yes.
And that would have been tough. We wouldn't have just changed the rules to say 24 and a half hours, would we? We did stick to our own rules.
Yeah, but we made it.
Well, it sounds like I better get my thinking cap on and come up with a new challenge for us for next year.
You should.
Okay, and in the meantime, off to sample more of the KMF coffee and cake, I think.